So I'm going to get on with the air conditioning refrigerant compressor replacement in this car, guys. You guys know the story. Lots of issues with the car over the past. The compressor that's currently in the car has multiple issues. The main one currently being bearing failure. So why not replace the bearing? As I said, there's multiple issues. Look at the back videos if you're interested. There's the part number, manufacturer. Take note, the oil, the refrigerant oil that's in here is PAG 100. The car is originally equipped with 46. Okay, so let me say this again, because somebody got me pointing out in the comments that I've got the wrong oil. The original installation calls for PAG 46. Why am I putting 100 in there? Because the compressor is the most critical component in the system with respect to lubrication requirements. Don't take my word for it. Here's what James Halderman has to say. Apart from the expansion valve, the thermostatic expansion valve, which moves very little, of course, this is the main concern with refrigerant. It seems kind of stupid to ignore the specification that the manufacturer spells out, both on the compressor and on the box. There's the part number, by the way, if you're interested. 100, right? We'll do a bit of an oil balance. I'll try and purge the system best I can. So you'll need the compressor, of course. You'll need perhaps oil. I don't know. Well, this comes shipped with 130 cc's in here. The decal actually tells you so. Okay. Although 130 cc's of oil is not 5 ounces, but academic perhaps. Another point of interest, I will be using an R134A replacement, guys. This is basically propane butane mix. That's why when you see, when I've got the manifold up, it might not be R134 that I've got on the screen as far as the refrigerant in use. It might be the propane spec. I think it's R700 and something. I don't know. I'll look it up. So in case that confuses you, just to be clear. So I'm going to show you a wee bit of a summary of how I'm going to approach this. It's functional. You can see the coils clearly pulling in the clutch. And so about 3.7, so that's about 4 ohms ish. Quick math. Sounds about right. Be sensible. So the gauges are hooked up to the car here, guys. You can see the system is completely empty. Both valves are open, and the depressors are screwed down on the couplers. System's completely empty. Try and do this one-handed. 14 mil onto the belt tensioner there, guys, to remove the belt. This is a non-AC belt. I actually had this jumped out because of the state of the bearing. A long extension with your 10mm socket, guys, is ideal. The angle is reasonable. You get down on those 2 bolts to hold the lines on. The O-ring will need to be replaced, and be aware the caps on these, they are in fact O-ringed. This is pressurized with nitrogen, I believe, when it's shipped, so be aware when you remove it. And I bought myself just a generic O-ring kit to replace the rings. So the 4 mounting bolts here, guys, ideally if you have a long spanner to crack them, because they'll be corroded in there pretty tight by the time you get to them, no doubt. I had this compressor off last year, so these are not too bad. As I said, 12 mil. They're quite long. So just before you remove the last 2 bolts to get the compressor out, guys, don't forget about the connector here. Try not to damage that. You're going to have to reuse that. Pretty straightforward. No, not rocket science. As I said, 4 bolts. The 2 bolts for the lines, 10mm, and the lines themselves. The compressor is a wee bit different, being an aftermarket one. It's probably designed to be used on different applications. But the main mounting points, of course, is a showstopper. They do appear to be the same. I think I mentioned this is a Panisonic compressor. Perhaps I was mistaken. It looks like a, well, I'm mistaken. It looks like it's a Matsushita. Yeah, and although that doesn't say PAG 46, I think if you cross-reference this, it is PAG 46, the original installation. So you can see they have an adapter line here to bring this line up to roughly where it should be. I hope none of this causes any grief. Physically, it's a wee bit different in location. The connector appears to be the same, although the orientation appears to be different. Again, hopefully that's not an issue, but I guess we'll find out. So here's the segment in the manual, guys. It tells you how to actually balance the oil. That is to say, when you remove the compressor, how to make sure you have the correct amount of oil in the system. So it also tells you for the relevant parts in the system how much volume of oil. So what I've done is I've taken when you replace the condenser, it says 75 cc's of oil. I won't bore you with the details with all the other components, but also if the refrigerant is replaced over here, it tells you another 10 cc's. So I've done the math, and guess what? It adds up to 130 cc's, which is what's in here. So I'm in a position where I'm going to attempt to purge any oil in the system, get as much as I can. It's inevitable I'm going to have a bit of intermix, but as far as I know, 46 and 100 are missable. So a degree of intermix is, as I said, inevitable. Not ideal, but I'm going to see how much oil I can get out of this, although I suspect it will be very, very low. So, as suspected there, guys, I didn't get much out of the compressor, 10 milliliters. cc's. So because of the oil spec issue, what I'm going to try and do is blow the system out to see how much oil I can actually capture, and then once I have the figures for what I've removed versus what should be in there, I'll try and make a judgment call. No ideal, but I don't see how else I can actually deal with this. So as I said, guys, because of the likely contamination in the system, moisture wise, I'm going to change the desiccant bag anyway. So you can see there's a couple of plugs on the bottom of the condenser that houses the desiccant bag. Now this is an aftermarket coil, so yours may be different if it's the original installation, which I think is a Denso. This is a Nissan, not to be confused with Nissan, but Nissan. So I'm going to take that plug out the bottom. That's where the bag actually slips up the tube there. And I'm going to assess the oil that's in the system from here. Again, trying to make a reasonable decision. So there's the plug. There's another few milliliters of oil in the bottom there. I expected this to be drenched in oil, but it seems light and dry, so perhaps that's a good system. It's a good sign. Although I think that blackness is probably moisture. Perhaps that's normal to some degree. I'm not sure. No expert. Not by a long shot. None of these plugs seem to be the same diameter. I'll just reuse those, change the O-rings. So what I'm going to do is again try and blow this out from the top side, because of course the desiccant bag is right at the very bottom of the system. I've got the plug out and the catch beaker there. I'll see if I can get any oil out. Okay, so I was really able to capture nothing more than a few drops out of the system. So that means this is 10 milliliters, let's say, if the system capacity is 130 milliliters. I'm basically missing about 120. Now, I know when I changed the condenser coil on this a year or two back, I put the correct measure of oil into the system. So I think there's essentially no oil in this system. I blew it out with my line there. I cranked the pressure up and blew it every which way till Sunday. I can't really extract any oil in there. No doubt there's residual oil in there. It's trapped. X amount of oil can remain in the system. How much? I don't know. But I think it's a pretty small amount. So that leaves me with a decision to be made. This comes shipped with the entire system measure of oil of 130 cc's. We've already talked about the volume in the system. I think with this being extracted, it leaves just a residual amount of oil, the original PAG 46 in the system. And again, as far as I know, it's miscible. So I'm just going to go with this measure of oil in the system on top of the unknown quantity in the system. Now, it might be a wee bit over capacity. So what's the danger of overcapacity? As far as I know, it just can affect heat transfer. It's less than ideal heat transfer in the system if you have overcapacity oil, too much oil. And of course, ridiculous amounts of oils could potentially slug the compressor, but I don't think that will be the case at all. So the danger of under-oiling the system is you melt the system down, of course, right? I'm trying to avoid that. So may not be correct. By all means, sing it in the comments there, guys, if you disagree with my decision. But I'm going to just leave the standard measure of oil in here, 130. That's the complete system volume on top of the residual oil that's in there. I can't remove any more. I'm no flushing it. That's going overboard. And we'll leave it at that. There's a fair bit of aluminum oxide formed around the fittings here, guys. So I suspect this job is going to depend to some degree on how clean you can get those. So I just scotch brighted up the fittings both sides. I just have them temporarily blocked here, of course, so no rubbish gets in. O-rings, going to change the O-rings. Perhaps you could use the O-rings that come on the caps. I suspect some people will, but I'm going to use them from the kit. 4 bolts are on and torqued to 18 foot-pounds. Just a suggestion, put the connector on before you actually mount the compressor rigidly, because after an hour of trying to get the connector on because of the different orientation, I have to dismount it again, put the connector on first, and then put the compressor on. Okay, so in order to get that connector in place when the compressor is adrift from the block, guys, you'll have to remove the clamping here, tie wraps, just so you can get a wee bit extra play on the harness. Put it back in situ, clamp it back up when the connector's in place. So just the spec on the compressor mounting bolts, as I said there, guys, it is in fact 18 foot-pounds. On the drawing with the 2 lines there. Item A, you can see the 2 lines going to the compressor, the suction and discharge line, so that you torque those to 8 foot-pounds. So yeah, the 2 lines here, you're going to have to work these lines a bit, because with the positions being altered, they don't fit properly, including this line here was contacting the bolt head, so I couldn't actually get the fitting bolt on, so had to take it off, mount it, bend the line a bit. Typical aftermarket stuff. So yeah, expect a bit of nonsense with this, but they're on, so we'll carry on. So the O-rings on the desiccant can are all cleaned, lubed up. I've cleaned the screen here, guys. It was pretty clean, so we're all good. Leave the bag. Don't take the desiccant out of the bag until the very last moment. Get it in as quick as possible. Sorry, guys. Watch what we're doing here. I'm going to cross thread this aluminum thread. Well, it's getting late here, guys. I guess I'll call it a night. Carry on tomorrow. I was just doing a preliminary vacuum check on the system. No point in doing anything else if it doesn't hold even basic vacuum. So I was just checking it. You can see I'm almost at the 30-minute mark here. I've lost 0.3 of inch of mercury. So yeah, that was lost pretty much right up front. The check has really lost nothing in the last 25 minutes. So I suspect that was maybe just a wee bit of moisture coming out of the system, or maybe the line constricting a wee bit. You have to kind of, there's a wee bit of an art to reading the gauges there when it's a small fluctuation like that, 0.3. Is it a real leak? I don't think so. As I said, it hasn't changed at all in the last 25 minutes. So I'm pretty happy with the preliminary. As I said, or maybe I didn't say, I'm going to check it with the nitrogen first. I'm going to take it up to about 120, 140 psi, and I'll leak check it with that. I'll nitrogen sweep it, and then at the end of the check, I'll just bleed out some nitrogen again, try to purge out as much moisture as possible, and then I'll pull it under a vacuum proper. This is just really me setting up the gauges before I call it a night. So we'll call that part 1, guys, and we'll carry on part 2, which is basically again the leak checking, the pulling the system under vacuum, assuming everything goes according to plan, installing the refrigerant, and function checking the system, leak checking the system, function checking it, operational check it, performance check it. We'll see how it goes. That's it. Cheers.